Supreme General Zaxtal's mandibles clicked in amusement as he studied the primitive warships through his command viewport. The vessels were almost laughably small compared to his mighty dreadnought, the Celestial Sovereign. His four eyes blinked in sequence as he zoomed the display to focus on what the humans called an aircraft carrier. "Look at these pathetic excuses for warships," he announced to his bridge crew, his translator converting his clicks and chirps into standard Galactic Basic. "They still use chemical propulsion and rely on controlled explosions for their weapon systems." The bridge crew, a collection of the hegemony's finest warriors, joined their leader in mock laughter. Commander James "Iron Jack" Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiance, his weather-beaten face illuminated by the soft blue glow of combat displays. The alien transmission was being broadcast on all frequencies, an intentional show of disrespect. Morrison's weathered hands calmly adjusted his command console, making sure every word was being recorded for posterity. "Their largest vessel," Zaxtal continued, his voice dripping with contempt, "uses something called nuclear fission for power. They haven't even mastered basic antimatter containment." The general's exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lights of his command center, each plate decorated with symbols of past victories. And their weapons, projectiles propelled by chemical explosions. How did such a species ever achieve spaceflight? Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez, Morrison's executive officer, gripped the rail of her station until her knuckles turned white. "Sir, they're broadcasting this on every channel, even civilian frequencies." Morrison nodded slowly, the ghost of a smile playing across his face. "Let them talk, Lieutenant. Pride goes before a fall." He turned to his combat systems officer. "Status of Operation Undertow. The Barracuda and her battle group are in positions." "Sir." "Depth of 2,000 feet, running silent." Above the earth, Zaxtal's display showed more of humanity's naval forces moving into defensive positions. The general's translator struggled to convert his next sound into basic. It was something between a laugh and a sneer. "They don't even have energy shields. Their ships rely on primitive metal alloys for protection. One hit from our plasma cannons would vaporize their strongest vessel." His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vexlor, approached with a data slate. "Supreme General, our scans show they're deploying their forces in a most inefficient pattern. They appear to be—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Scattering." "Of course they are." Zaxtal waved a clawed hand dismissively. "They know they cannot stand against us. Perhaps they hope to save a few of their precious vessels by running away." He turned to his communications officer. "Broadcast again, all frequencies. Let these humans know the futility of their resistance." Back on the Defiance, Morrison watched as the alien fleet maintained their high-orbit formation. Every taunt, every insult, every broadcast gave his forces more data about their communication systems. Lieutenant Rodriguez's console beeped softly. "Sir, the Barracuda reports ready. Captain Reynolds says his torpedo tubes are flooded and ready for launch orders." Morrison allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. The aliens had spent the last hour broadcasting their superiority across every frequency they could access. Not once had they thought to scan the oceans below. Not once had they considered that a species born on a water world might have developed military doctrine beyond their understanding. "Send word to all ships," Morrison said quietly. "Maintain current course and speed. Let them think we're as primitive as they believe." He watched as another burst of alien laughter echoed through the bridge speakers. "Let them think our vessels are simple because they float on water or fly through air." The alien general's next broadcast filled the command center. "Your species will learn its place in the galaxy, humans. Your primitive vessels will make fine examples of what happens to those who resist the hegemony." Morrison's smile grew just a fraction wider. Soon, very soon, Supreme General Zach Stahl would learn why humanity's seeming technological disadvantages were actually their greatest strengths. But for now, he would let the alien commander laugh. After all, the best victories were the ones your enemy never saw coming until it was too late. The depths of Earth's Pacific Ocean concealed more than just marine life. At 2,000 feet below the surface, Captain Michael Reynolds of the U.S. Barracuda watched his sonar display with practiced patience. The nuclear submarine's crew moved with precision through their silent running protocols, each step perfected through years of training. Sonar, the sonar operator's whisper carried through the command center. No active pings from above. The alien fleet remains focused on surface contacts. Reynolds nodded, his eyes never leaving the strategic display. 5 other submarines from the Deep Strike Group maintained perfect formation, despite the ocean current's best efforts to separate them. The U.S. Hammerhead, Stingray, Nautilus, Leviathan, and Kraken, each vessel a testament to humanity's mastery of undersea warfare. Engineering reports all systems nominal. Sir, his executive officer, Lieutenant Commander James Wilson, reported. Reactor output at 30%, more than enough to maintain silent running. Above them, Supreme General Zach Stahl continued his broadcast of superiority, unaware that his every word was being analyzed by the submarine's advanced acoustic processing systems. Each transmission revealed more about the hegemony's communication protocols and energy signatures. Tactical update on missile status, Reynolds commanded softly. All vertical launch tubes show green, sir. Quantum-guided warheads are armed and ready. Surface-to-orbit calculations have been updated based on the alien fleet's current position. The captain allowed himself a small smile. The hegemony's arrogance had led them to maintain a stationary formation, perfect for what was to come. Their sensors, designed to detect energy weapons and plasma signatures, were blind to the threats moving silently through Earth's oceans. Message from the Defiance, sir, the communications officer reported. Commander Morrison signals that Operation Undertow is go for Phase 2. Authentication codes verify. Reynolds straightened in his chair. Very well. Signal the strike group. Prepare to move to launch depth. Maintain emissions control. No active sonar, no communications until we break silence. The submarine battle group began their carefully choreographed ascent. Years of training in Earth's various oceans had taught human forces lessons that spaceborne civilizations never had to learn. The complex interactions of temperature layers, pressure gradients, and salinity provided natural stealth that no advanced technology could match. Passing through the thermocline, the navigation officer reported. 1,000 feet, 900, 800. Lieutenant Commander Wilson studied the tactical display. The alien fleet hasn't moved, sir. They're still focusing their attention on our surface ships. Of course they are, Reynolds replied. They think three-dimensionally, but only above the surface. They never had to master undersea warfare. Their desert world gave them no reason to look down. The Barracuda and her sisters continued their silent ascent. Each vessel carried enough firepower to level a small city, their missiles specifically modified for this operation. The quantum guidance systems would allow their warheads to track and strike with devastating accuracy, even through the void of space. 400 feet, 300, approaching launch depth. Reynolds watched as his crew maintained their professional calm. They had trained for this, had known this day would come. Humanity had never stopped preparing, never stopped innovating, even as they reached for the stars. Launch depth achieved, sir. All strike group vessels report ready. Very well. Reynolds took a deep breath. Tactical, unlock missile control systems. Prepare for maximum depth strike launch. Set warheads for kinetic penetration mode. Above them, the alien general was about to learn why dismissing Earth's military forces had been his greatest mistake. The oceans had taught humanity lessons about warfare that the hegemony could never understand. Lessons about patience, about striking from unexpected angles, about using the environment itself as a weapon. Strike Group reports ready, sir. Awaiting your command. Reynolds placed his hand on the launch control. Soon, very soon, Supreme General Zaxtal would understand why Earth's vessels weren't primitive at all. They were the product of centuries of evolution, of learning to fight in the most challenging environment their world had to offer. All vessels, prepare to launch on my mark. Let's show these aliens why they should have looked below the waves. Supreme General Zaxtal's confidence began to waver as he watched the human vessels execute their scattered stars maneuver. His initial amusement turned to confusion as the Earth ships moved in what appeared to be random patterns, breaking formation in ways that defied traditional combat logic. Sub-Commander Vexlor, he called out, his translator struggling to convey his growing irritation. Explain this chaos. Why are they not forming proper battle lines? They appear to be. Vexlor's analysis was cut short as new data flooded his console. Supreme General, our sensors are detecting multiple energy signatures from the planet's surface. They're extremely faint, almost like background radiation. Commander Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiance, his eyes fixed on the tactical display as his fleet executed the complex maneuver. Each ship moved with precision, their seemingly random course changes following a pattern developed through centuries of naval combat experience. Status of surface fleet dispersal, Morrison commanded, his voice steady despite the tension. All ships maintaining assigned vectors. Sir, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. The carriers Enterprise and Roosevelt are in position. Fighter groups are ready for launch on your command. Above them, the hegemony fleet maintained their rigid formation, their ships arranged in the traditional crescent pattern that had won them countless battles across the galaxy. Zaxtal's dreadnought, the celestial sovereign, held position at the center, its weapon systems powered, but not yet targeting. Primitive or not, Zaxtal announced to his bridge crew, we should end this quickly. Prepare main batteries for initial strike. Target their largest surface vessels first. Morrison's communication officer turned from his station. Sir, the Barracuda reports strike group in final position. Captain Reynolds awaits your signal. Very well. Morrison allowed himself a moment to appreciate the irony. The aliens' advanced sensors were about to become their greatest weakness. Signal all ships. Execute Phase 3. Launch fighter screen. The sky above Earth's oceans erupted in controlled chaos. Fighters launched from the carriers, their formations adding to the apparent disorder. To the alien fleet, it looked like panic, a desperate attempt to mount some kind of defense. Look at them scatter, Zaxtal sneered. They don't even maintain proper combat spacing. This will be over quickly. He raised his clawed hand to order the first strike. Below the waves, Captain Reynolds watched his display as the surface fleet completed their maneuver. The alien ships had taken the bait, focusing all their attention on the apparent disarray above. Strike group reading ready, sir, his tactical officer reported. All tubes show green. Targeting solutions locked. Morrison's voice crackled through the secure channel. All units, execute Operation Undertow. Weapons free. The ocean's surface erupted as multiple missile launches broke through the waves. The submarine strike group, hidden until now, released their full arsenal. Dozens of quantum-guided missiles streaked toward the sky, their trajectories calculated to thread through the gaps created by the surface fleet's scattered stars formation. On the Celestial Sovereign's bridge, alarms blared as new threats appeared on their sensors. Zaxtal's mandibles clicked in shock as he realized the truth. The chaos above had been a screen, designed to hide the real attack from below. Impossible, he roared. They have underwater weapon platforms. Raise shields. Direct all power to forward defenses. But the hegemony shield technology, designed to counter energy weapons and plasma attacks, proved less effective against the kinetic force of multiple missile impacts. The first wave of missiles struck home, their warheads detonating in precise sequence. Morrison watched as the alien fleet's perfect formation began to break apart. The scattered stars maneuver had served its purpose, creating firing lanes for the submarine launch, while appearing to be nothing more than desperate evasion. "Signal the strike group," he ordered. "Prepare second wave launch. Let's show them why Earth's navies learned to fight in 3 dimensions long before we reached space." The battle for Earth had begun, and Supreme General Zaxtal was learning a harsh lesson about underestimating his opponents. The human fleet might use primitive technology, but their tactics were anything but simple. The first wave of missiles tore through the hegemony's formation, their quantum-guided warheads finding gaps in the alien shields that should not have existed. Supreme General Zaxtal gripped his command podium as the celestial sovereign shuddered from a near miss. "Damage report," he demanded, his translator unable to fully convey the mix of rage and disbelief in his voice. "Multiple ships reporting critical damage, Supreme General," Sub-Commander Vexlor responded, his claws dancing across his console. "The human weapons, they're not following standard attack patterns. Each missile appears to be operating independently, yet somehow coordinating with the others." Below the waves, Captain Reynolds of the U.S. Barracuda watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. The first wave had performed exactly as planned, exploiting the fundamental weakness in hegemony shield technology, their inability to maintain consistent coverage against multiple small-scale kinetic impacts. "Strike group reports ready for second wave launch," his tactical officer announced. "All tubes reloaded and targeting solutions updated based on enemy movement patterns." Reynolds nodded. "Signal the other boats. Prepare for maximum depth launch on my mark. Time to show them what Earth's silent service can really do." Above the ocean's surface, Commander Morrison watched from the U.S. Defiance as the alien fleet attempted to regroup. Their once perfect crescent formation had dissolved into chaos as ships tried to compensate for the unexpected attack vector. "Sir," Lieutenant Rodriguez called out, "the Enterprise and Roosevelt report fighter groups are in position for Phase 2 of the operation." "Very well." Morrison's weather-worn face showed no emotion as he gave the order. "Signal the carriers, launch the second wave of fighters, and tell Captain Reynolds he is clear to begin his next attack run." The ocean's surface erupted once again as the submarine strike group released their second volley. This time, the missiles emerged in a complex pattern, their trajectories calculated to take advantage of the gaps created by the first wave's impact. On the Celestial Sovereign's bridge, Zaxtal watched in horror as his fleet's advanced targeting systems failed to lock onto the incoming threats. The missiles seemed to dance through space, their paths defying the logical patterns his combat computers were designed to predict. "Impossible," he snarled. "These primitives cannot possibly have developed such advanced guidance systems. Their technology is centuries behind ours." "Supreme General," Vexlor's voice carried a note of fear. "Analysis shows their weapons are using the debris from our damaged ships as cover. They're learning from our movement patterns." The second wave struck home with devastating effect. Quantum warheads detonated in precise sequence, each explosion creating shockwaves that amplified the impact of the next. Ships that had survived the first wave found their shields collapsing under the coordinated assault. Reynolds watched the carnage through his periscope, the surface of the ocean reflecting the brief, bright flashes of explosions in orbit. His crew maintained their professional silence, but he could sense their pride. Generations of submarine warfare experience had created this moment. "Message from the Defiance," his communications officer reported. "Commander Morrison says to begin Phase 3. Authentication codes verify." "Very well." Reynolds turned to his tactical officer. Prepare the nuclear-tipped cruise missiles. Time to show them why humanity never stopped developing our primitive weapons. Above, the hegemony fleet's formation had completely broken down. Ships fire their energy weapons wildly, their beams slicing through empty space as Earth's forces demonstrated the full power of three-dimensional combat doctrine. "Sir," Rodriguez called out from the Defiance's bridge. "The Barracuda reports nuclear cruise missiles armed and ready, awaiting your final authorization." Morrison studied his tactical display, watching as the alien fleet struggled to counter attacks from both above and below. Supreme General Zaxtal was about to learn another lesson about humanity's so-called primitive technology. Sometimes, the oldest weapons were still the most effective. "Send the authorization," he ordered. "Let's show them what real thunder sounds like." Supreme General Zaxtal watched in mounting horror as his fleet's energy weapons missed their targets yet again. The human vessels moved in patterns that defied traditional space combat logic, using the planet's atmosphere and ocean currents in ways his tactical computers couldn't predict. "How are they doing this?" he demanded, slamming his clawed hand against his command console. "Our targeting systems are the most advanced in the galaxy." Supreme General Vexlor's voice trembled as he delivered his report. "The humans are using their ocean's thermal layers to mask their submarine signatures. Our sensors can't distinguish between natural temperature variations and their vessel movements." Below the waves, Captain Reynolds guided the U.S. Barracuda through a complex series of maneuvers. His crew worked with silent efficiency as they exploited every advantage their environment offered. "Con, sonar," the sonar operator whispered, detecting multiple enemy scanning attempts. "They're trying to penetrate the thermocline layer." Reynolds allowed himself a grim smile. "Let them try. They don't understand that every ocean current, every temperature gradient, every salinity change is part of our defense." On the U.S. Defiance, Commander Morrison coordinated the surface fleet's response. The nuclear-tipped cruise missiles from the submarine strike group had created electromagnetic disturbances in the upper atmosphere, further confusing the alien targeting systems. "Sir," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, "the Enterprise reports their fighter screen is successfully drawing enemy fire away from our missile platforms." "Excellent." Morrison studied his tactical display. "Signal Captain Reynolds. Begin the next phase of Operation Undertow. Let's show them how we fight in all three dimensions." The hegemony fleet's formation continued to deteriorate as they struggled to adapt to Earth's combat doctrine. Their ships, designed for the empty void of space, found themselves fighting an enemy that used planetary physics as a weapon. Supreme General, one of Zaxtal's officers, called out, "Our forward shields are failing. The human weapons are somehow coordinating their impact points." "Impossible," Zaxtal roared. "They're using primitive projectile weapons. How can they possibly?" His words were cut short as another volley of missiles broke through the ocean's surface. The submarine strike group had timed their launch to coincide with a massive temperature inversion in the atmosphere, using the natural phenomenon to mask their attack vector. "Multiple impacts detected," Vexlor shouted. "Our port battle group has lost shield coherence." Reynolds watched through his periscope as the results of their attack became visible even from beneath the waves. The hegemony ships, their advanced energy weapons still firing uselessly at sensor ghosts, were being systematically dismantled by Earth's combined arms approach. "Message from the Defiance," his communications officer reported. "Commander Morrison says to prepare for the final phase." "Very well." Reynolds turned to his crew. "Take us deeper. Let's show them another trick from the Silent Service playbook." Above, Morrison coordinated with his surface fleet as they executed their next maneuver. The carriers Enterprise and Roosevelt launched their reserve fighter squadrons, creating a complex web of targets that further confused the alien targeting systems. "They never learned," Morrison mused, speaking softly to Rodriguez. They conquered 100 worlds, but never had to fight in an ocean. Never had to master combat in a medium that fights back. Zaxtel's bridge had descended into chaos as warning alarms blared from every station. His mighty fleet, pride of the hegemony, was being defeated by tactics they had never encountered in all their years of conquest. "Reroute all power to forward shields," he commanded. "Launch our fighter screens. We must." Another coordinated strike cut through his orders. The combined effect of submarine-launched missiles, surface ship fire, and fighter squadron attacks had created a perfect storm of destruction that no single direction defense could counter. "Sir," Rodriguez called out on the Defiance, "the Barracuda reports ready for the final phase. Captain Reynolds awaits your command." Morrison nodded, knowing that the next few minutes would demonstrate once and for all why humanity's naval experience had prepared them for this moment. "Give the order. Let's end this." Supreme General Zaxtel's mandibles clicked in frustration as he deployed his elite guard ships, the finest vessels in the hegemony fleet. Their sleek forms moved into advanced combat formation, their energy weapons fully charged and ready to deliver what he hoped would be a decisive strike. "We will not be defeated by these primitives," he declared, his voice carrying across the bridge of the Celestial Sovereign. "Launch all remaining fighters. Target their surface vessels with everything we have." Commander Morrison watched the new threat development from the U.S. Defiance's bridge. The elite guard ships were exactly where he wanted them, committed to a forward attack that left them vulnerable to his next move. "Signal the submarine strike group," he ordered. "Tell Captain Reynolds to begin the EMP strike and get me status on our drone swarms." "Drone control reports ready, sir," Lieutenant Rodriguez responded. "All units prepped for mass launch. The Enterprise and Roosevelt have their electromagnetic pulse weapons primed." Below the surface, the U.S. Barracuda and her sister ships glided into position. Captain Reynolds studied his tactical display as the final preparations were made. His crew moved with practiced efficiency, loading specialized EMP warheads into their vertical launch systems. "Strike group reports ready," his executive officer announced. "All tubes show green for synchronized launch." "Very well." Reynolds keyed his command circuit. "All boats, prepare to surface on my mark. Time to show them the true cost of their pride." The ocean's surface erupted as 6 nuclear submarines broke through the waves in perfect formation. Their missile tubes opened in unison, releasing a devastating barrage of EMP weapons directly into the path of the elite guard ships. "What are they doing?" Zaxtel demanded as his tactical display showed the new threat. "Their vessels are exposing themselves. Target those launch platforms immediately." But before his elite guard could respond, the sky filled with thousands of small objects. The combined carrier groups had launched their drone swarms, each unit carrying a miniaturized EMP device. The drones moved in complex patterns, using advanced swarm intelligence to find gaps in the alien defenses. "Multiple EMP detonations detected," Vexlor shouted as the first wave hit. "Our shield harmonics are fluctuating. We're losing coherence across all systems." Morrison watched as the carefully orchestrated attack unfolded. The combined effect of submarine-launched EMP weapons and drone-delivered payloads created a cascading failure throughout the hegemony's advanced electronics. Their pride in their technology became their greatest weakness, he observed to Rodriguez. They'd never considered we might use their own advanced systems against them. The elite guard ships began to drift, their power systems disrupted by the electromagnetic assault. Their energy weapons, previously humming with destructive potential, fell silent as emergency systems struggled to maintain basic life support. "Impossible." Zaxtel raged as his own ship's systems began to fail. "These are primitive weapons. How can they defeat our advanced shielding?" Reynolds watched through his periscope as the results of their attack became clear. The hegemony's mighty fleet, with all its advanced technology, had never prepared for such a basic form of electronic warfare. Signal from the Defiance, his communications officer reported. Commander Morrison says to prepare for final phase. All strike groups are to move into position for the killing blow. Very well. Reynolds turned to his crew. Take us back under. Let's finish what their pride started. Above, the remains of the hegemony fleet struggled to regroup. Their formation, once a perfect display of military precision, had devolved into chaos as ships tried to restore their critical systems. Morrison keyed his fleet-wide command circuit. All units, execute final strike protocol. Show them why Earth's combined arms doctrine is anything but primitive. The sky above Earth's oceans became a symphony of destruction as surface ships, submarines, fighters, and drones launched their coordinated attack. Each component of Earth's military force played its part in a battle plan that had been centuries in the making. Supreme General Zach Stahl could only watch as his elite guard, the pride of the hegemony fleet, fell before what he had dismissed as primitive technology. In his arrogance, he had failed to recognize a simple truth. Sometimes the oldest weapons, in the hands of those who truly understood war, were the most effective of all. Supreme General Zach Stahl's bridge erupted in chaos as warning signals blared from every console. The Celestial Sovereign's advanced systems, still reeling from the EMP attack, struggled to track the multiple threats converging on his position. Target their command vessel, he roared, his translator crackling with static. All remaining power to forward weapons. The U.S. Defiance must be destroyed. The massive alien flagship turned its main guns toward Morrison's ship, energy building in its forward battery. The Defiance's bridge crew maintained their composure as the threat indicators screamed their warning. Sir, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, the Celestial Sovereign is powering up its main weapon array. Their targeting systems are locked on our position. Morrison nodded calmly. Right where we want them. Signal Captain Reynolds. Execute Operation Ghost Protocol. Below the waves, the U.S. Barracuda and her strike group had maneuvered into their final attack position. Captain Reynolds watched his tactical display as the last pieces of their strategy fell into place. All tubes show ready, his weapons officer reported. Quantum-tipped torpedo armed and tracking. We have a clean shot at their flagship's ventral section. Reynolds allowed himself a grim smile. They still haven't learned to look down. Prepare to surface on my mark. The Celestial Sovereign's main guns opened fire, releasing a devastating barrage of energy weapons at the Defiance. The ocean's surface boiled, where near misses struck the water, creating massive steam clouds that further obscured the battlefield. Direct hit, Vexlor announced triumphantly. The human command ship has taken significant damage. Zaxtel leaned forward in his command pod, his 4 eyes fixed on the burning form of the U.S. Defiance. At last, their primitive vessel cannot withstand our superior. His victory speech was cut short as new alarms blared through his bridge. The ocean behind his flagship erupted as the U.S. Barracuda broke through the surface, her hull gleaming in the light of orbital combat. Below us, Vexlor screamed. They have a vessel below us. Reynolds stood in the Barracuda's control room, his hand steady on the fire control. All tubes, fire as they bear. Show them why you never corner a submarine. The quantum-tipped torpedo launched with devastating precision, its advanced guidance systems tracking the one weakness in the alien flagship's design. Their complete lack of underwater combat experience had left their ventral shielding dangerously thin. Incoming weapon. The Celestial Sovereign's defense officer called out. Unable to get a lock. The targeting computers can't predict its path. Zaxtal watched in horror as the torpedo approached, its course defying his ship's defensive programming. The weapon moved like no space-based projectile he had ever encountered, using techniques developed over centuries of undersea warfare. Brace for impact. He commanded, but it was too late. The torpedo struck home with devastating effect, its quantum warhead bypassing what remained of the flagship's shields. The celestial sovereign's ventral hull cracked open like an egg, secondary explosions cascading through its massive frame. On the Defiance's bridge, Morrison watched the explosion reflect off the ocean's surface. His ship, despite its apparent damage, had played its part perfectly, drawing the alien commander's attention while the real threat approached from below. "Sir," Rodriguez reported with a hint of pride, "the Barracuda reports direct hit. The enemy flagship is critically damaged." "Signal Captain Reynolds," Morrison ordered. "Tell him well done, and get me a status report on the rest of the alien fleet." The remaining hegemony ships, watching their Supreme Commander's vessel break apart, began to fall back. Their formation, already shattered by previous attacks, dissolved completely as individual captains sought to save their ships. Reynolds watched through his periscope as the celestial sovereign's once mighty form drifted helplessly in orbit. His crew maintained their professional silence, but the pride in their achievement was palpable. "Message from the Defiance," his communications officer announced. "Commander Morrison says to stand by for final orders. The enemy fleet is in full retreat." Supreme General Zaxtal, standing in his ruined bridge, finally understood the fatal flaw in his strategy. He had dismissed Earth's forces as primitive, never realizing that their experience fighting in Earth's oceans had prepared them for warfare in ways his space-borne civilization could never comprehend. Supreme General Zaxtal stood in the U.S. Barracuda's conference room, his once pristine exoskeleton scared from the battle. The proud leader of the hegemony fleet found himself in a position he had never imagined, preparing to sign terms of surrender aboard what he had dismissed as a primitive vessel. Commander Morrison sat across the table, his weather-worn face showing no sign of triumph or mockery. Captain Reynolds stood by his side, both officers maintaining the professional dignity that centuries of naval tradition had ingrained in Earth's military forces. "Before you sign," Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of experience, "there are some things you should understand about why you lost this battle." Zaxtal's mandibles clicked in what might have been resignation. "You used our own arrogance against us, made us believe your technology was inferior." "No," Reynolds interjected, "we used what your people never had the chance to learn. Every tactic, every strategy we employed today was born from centuries of fighting in Earth's oceans." The alien general's four eyes blinked in sequence as understanding began to dawn. Morrison spread out a series of tactical displays showing the battle's key moments. "Your fleet fights in 2 dimensions," Morrison explained. "Up, down, forward, back, but always on a single plane. We learned to think in true 3-dimensional combat before we ever reached space." Lieutenant Rodriguez entered the conference room, carrying additional battle analysis reports. The data showed how Earth's combined arms approach had systematically dismantled the hegemony's superior technology. "Your desert world never gave you oceans," Reynolds continued. "You never had to master submarine warfare, never had to learn how temperature layers could hide a vessel, never had to understand how pressure and density affect combat." Zaxtal picked up one of the reports, his clawed hands trembling slightly. "The scattered stars maneuver. It wasn't chaos at all, was it?" "No," Morrison confirmed. "It was a template developed by surface fleets fighting submarine forces. We adapted it for space combat, knowing your sensors would see only disorder where we had created perfect firing lanes." The conference room's displays showed replays of the battle's critical moments: the submarine strike group's coordinated attacks, the fighter screens drawing fire, the drone swarms exploiting gaps in alien defenses. "Your technology wasn't the problem," Reynolds added. "It was your doctrine. You never had to fight an enemy that could strike from truly unexpected angles. Every world you conquered fought the way you did." Zaxtal placed his hand on the surrender document. And those nuclear submarines, they were your true command centers all along. Morrison nodded. The silent service, we call them. Centuries of evolution in underwater warfare created vessels that could hide, strike, and vanish before the enemy knew what hit them. Space was just another ocean to us. The alien general finally put his signature to the document, the formal surrender of the mighty hegemony fleet to Earth's combined forces. His hand paused over the last line. "What will you include in your report to the Hegemony Council?" Morrison asked, though he already suspected the answer. "The truth," Zaxtel replied, his translator conveying a new note of respect. "That we encountered a species that mastered warfare in the most challenging environment their world could provide. That their seeming technological disadvantages were actually advantages we could not comprehend." Reynolds watched as the final signatures were applied. "Your people will come to understand that true combat mastery isn't about technology. It's about adaptation, about learning from your environment, and about respecting your enemy," Zaxtal added, understanding finally clear in his 4 eyes. "Even when, especially when, they appear less advanced than you." The surrender complete, Morrison stood and offered his hand in the human gesture of respect. After a moment's hesitation, Zaxtal took it. "Remember this day," Morrison said quietly. "Not as a defeat, but as a lesson. The universe has much to teach those willing to learn." As the alien general was escorted from the conference room, Reynolds turned to his commander. "Do you think they'll really learn from this?" Morrison watched through the viewport as Earth's combined fleet maintained their protective formation around the planet. "They'll have to, because now they know. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the places you least expect to find them."